The solar construction bust. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian Heise here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. I've got my stein of coffee and I thought we'd have a look at this article from the ABC discussing the solar industry. Solar generation is being buffeted by financial headwinds that are killing investment. Now before we go into this, I want to draw your attention to two things. One is a video I did 5 months ago about the Victorian government essentially destroying the solar industry. What they did is they intervened in the market, as governments love to do. I mean, this is a great vote buyer. It is a brilliant vote buyer. And don't get me wrong, I don't mind solar. What gets me angry about solar is the government artificially intervening in the market and subsidizing the installation of this stuff, particularly for people who don't need these subsidies. You know, I've sat around a table, at a function at the Brisbane Club. All these people that were quite wealthy could afford to pay $150 for lunch, and they were bragging about the subsidies they got that was probably equal to a year's income for a pensioner. I'd rather everyone just gets a tax discount and people who want this stuff pay the full price. But nonetheless, in Victoria, they've got this subsidy program. Now the problem is it's capped. The number of people who can get subsidies per month is capped. And it's essentially a 50% subsidy. So what happens is, you can see here in this, 3,767 homes. They could receive a $2,225 subsidy and they were all gone in 90 minutes. So essentially, the Victorian government, by introducing this market intervention, has capped the number of solar installations in the state to that number, and people just wait another month. What's the difference if you wait a month? What's your extra power bill going to be for a month if you have to wait, but you could save $2,000? So they've created this situation where there's incentive for people to hold off until they get the discount. And of course, that's now the cap for the number of installations that can essentially happen in Victoria. And what do you think it's doing to the industry? It's destroying it. It's limiting the growth. It's destroying innovation. And here we have, this is the Australian energy market. This is data available from the Australian energy market. And we can see here, this is more the infrastructure. Oh, look at all those wind farms that are producing nothing in Victoria. That's... Yeah, anyway, you'd be shocked at how much these things cost. Notice these coal plants, they're always, every time I look at this, they're always running at 100 or over 100%. And you've got then the gas ones is what they kick in when they're not making enough power. But if you scroll down here, you can see the total energy performance. And this one here, you can tick on enough, you can see the rooftop solar that it's contributing to the grid. And see this big gap here? That's nighttime. That's nighttime. But this is a good reference for you to get an understanding of just how our energy production is happening in Australia. I mean, you've got solar plants here at, 43% efficiency. Well, actually, no, 43% of capacity. 43% of capacity. And this is the problem. There's one over at 60%. There's one, at just 18%. There's one at, there's a wind farm, solar. Good, we've got one at 90%. That's great. That's good. But it's only 45 megawatts, 64%. What do we have here in Queensland? Good, 97. Oh, that's the fossil fuel one, 86%, that's good. Fossil fuel. We don't have that many in Queensland. You see up north, a few of them, and they're all tracking over 30%. So they're doing okay. But they're not producing 100% of capacity, guys. So it's just to give you a bit of an understanding, because you have to think about this. All the investment, there's an opportunity cost to this, particularly if the government incentivizes it, if they encourage investment in this. That money could either have been provided as, maybe tax deductions for people who are struggling now that our cost of living are going up. So let's have a look at the bust of the solar construction industry. So who would want to become a solar farmer? Well, just look at regenerative agriculture. Then you can essentially become a solar farmer, turning sunlight into pastures and cows and plants. But I don't think that's what they're talking about, because you want all this stuff that's another source of silicosis in a couple of years' time, when it all needs to be removed and dismantled. But again, they probably won't talk about that either. So it's a key question out of a detailed independent study of the national electricity markets, more than 300 power generation units, fossil fuel driven, renewable and storage. The past 5 years have seen a boom in renewable energy, with a dizzying expansion in both utility scale and rooftop generation. But next year, renewable sources are expected to provide around 30% of power in the market, double around 15%. We'll bring this up here. Let's have a look. Look at this chart. So we go solar. There we go, solar, rooftop, wind. We'll throw that in. So we're looking at 8 out of 31 gigawatts dispatchable along the eastern coast of Australia. So it's nearly 30%. So yeah, no, they're right there. It could meet that claim. Natural gas, not really. Water, if we throw that in there, that can get even higher. We're getting at what? 10 out of 31 out of total here. So yeah, no. At least on the eastern coast, I could say that's potentially possible. But remember guys, it's only for these periods. It's not for this whole period here too. When I'm sure power supply diminishes, what do we say? The worst case here, we've got what? What are we looking at? 2.9? 2.9 out of 20. So it's a tenth. So at best, we could say 30%, at worst 10. So solar no longer a license to print money. Well, should it have ever been a license to print money? Is that the sign of an intervention in the market? Independent wholesale energy market consultant Alan O'Neill has waded through the 660 pages of the Generator Statistic Digest, GSD 2019, and found one of the key themes was the struggle new solar farms were having with the messy reality of the electricity market. A couple of years ago, it might have seemed like converting plots of old-style farmland into new-style solar farms will be licensed for someone to print money, he said. Back then, NEM wholesale prices were averaging close to 100 megawatts per hour, and the renewable generator's other key source of income, large-scale generation certificates, were roughly the same, around 80 to 90 megawatts per certificate, an indication of the paucity of renewable energy in the system at the time. Mr. O'Neill said falling construction costs also helped spur the investment boom, with some projects then reportedly being economic at all up revenues of around 60 to 80 megawatt range. Well, we want it cheaper, guys. We want it much cheaper than that to be cost effective. With potential wholesale revenues of more than double that level and relatively short lead times for construction, it was no great surprise to see a rush of utility-scale solar projects in the market, Mr. O'Neill said. That increased renewable capacity caused the value of LGCs to plummet. That in turn saw investment in large-scale solar evaporate. Yes, that's the market, guys. That's normal. Nothing wrong with that. Green energy markets analyst Tristan Edis said there is now so much new energy in place that renewable energy targets will be substantially oversupplied by 2022. Fantastic! So power will get even more cheaper than us because they've overinvested in the sector. Or will they shut them down and sell them off? Consequently, the price for renewable energy certificates has collapsed, and those scheduled for delivery in 2022 are changing hands at $15, while 2023 certificates are worth $10, he said. Nothing is traded beyond that year, but you could confidently expect they'd be worth even less. So a case study in struggling solar. But the collapse of the LGC market is only one nasty surprise that has blindsided renewable investors. The GSD, compiled by Global Roam, a software company operating in the NEM, and Greenview Strategic Consulting, delves into the operations of all the NEM's generators in extraordinary detail, a forensic analysis of the various plants, contribution to the grid, their efficiencies, reliabilities, costs, and utilities. It's instructive to look at the GSD data for many of these recent new entrants, which reveals that, like agricultural farming, solar farming can face multiple headwinds, Mr. O'Neill said. Looking across the board, Mr. O'Neill found there are 4 serious headwinds pushing back on large-scale solar. The case in point is one of Australia's largest solar farms in Colambury in New South Wales, Riverina District. I mean, look at that. Look at that. Wow. What's going to happen? Have any of these been done by the hailstorms we've recently had? And what's going to happen when all of this needs to get disposed of? These things don't last forever, guys. Just the wind turbines, which I learned. In America, they have to blow them up to bring them down. And the turbines are such a mess of epoxies and plastics and timber that they can't recycle them. They just bury them. Then all that crap's going to leach in the ground. So there's going to be an environmental cost to this stuff, because this is another silicosis scare. I'm scared what's going to happen when we start seeing these getting dismantled. Anyway, the state-of-the-art facility generating in late 2018 has the capacity to deliver close to 400 gigawatts of renewable energy to the national grid. Okay, Mr. O'Neill said his intention is not to run down solar farms, but to point out why many are struggling to deal with the finer details of the NEM's operation. So let's have a look. Falling marginal loss factors. These are the 4 issues that they raised. So the falling marginal loss factors, and my camera is stuttering, so I'm just going to shut a few other programs because it's probably getting a little hot in here. So MLFs account for transmission losses. Lower MLFs mean larger losses and therefore lower NEM revenues. And for that matter, fewer LGCs credited, which in turn also erodes revenue. Recently, MLFs have been recalculated, and more remote generators like Colambury saw its offset effectively slashed by 13% overnight. Movements like this were unprecedented a few years ago, with MLFs barely moving year to year for most generators. Mr. O'Neill said, looking at the GSD data, these savage cuts to solar farms' revenue bases are now fairly commonplace. Well, is that just because the power they're generating is so far remote that it's causing a loss? Isn't that physics? So spot price discounts, another arcane but important area of the NEM for generators. The GSD breaks out the various generators' net spot revenue per unit of production. Colambury, like most other solar farms, suffers a unit revenue discount to the spot average. The reason is fairly simple. Solar plants supply peak in the middle of the day as wholesale demand is falling away, compared to the reasonably nearby Uranquinty gas plant near Wagga Wagga, where output is concentrated at higher price peaks. Colambury's price harvest is pretty meager. Well, who cares, guys? They should have understood that. This is just a reality of the situation, guys. And we saw that in this chart that I showed you all in this very video. And I'll bring it up now. And we can see here, you can see here when solar is producing, guys. And this here is solar. So it's not that big. Rooftop solar is a bigger chunk. So it's competing with the rooftop solar. It's competing with all this other stuff. So we're investing. Remember, all of this rooftop solar, a big chunk of it's subsidized. So you're generating it when it's cheaper, when it's not needed as low. You know, I would have solar here, honestly, because it would be perfect for me, because I've got 6 screens here, I've got a computer, I've got some servers, I've got lights. You know, we're using a lot of power during the day, but we're going to raise the house, so I'm not bothering to put it on the roof now. So there you go. I mean, yeah, okay, that's not a vicious thing. That's just a reality. It shows terrible planning on the part of these investments. So network constraints. The GSD data looked at generation constraints from a number of different angles, and none of them are particularly flattering for the likes of Colambury. There are a number of factors constraining generation, but simply put, the network is like a freeway with a speed limit of 100 kilometers per hour, but traffic runs much slower in peak hours. Solar generators without storage generally have to merge into peak hour conditions, limiting their capacity to contribute. So, well, there you go. Let's see if I can find this energy production place in New South Wales. Where is it? It's near Wagga Wagga, isn't it? Sapphire, White Rocks. Where is it? Is it even on here? Oh wait, I'm looking in Queensland. Griffith, Wagga Wagga. There's the power station that we talked about. Is this the one here? Yes, here we go. So right now this plant is running at 61%, 109 of 180 megawatts. There's one here at Griffith. It's running at 100%. This one here is running at 122. So there we go. 61%, sorry, 109. Look at Wagga Wagga. It's producing much more. So this is a fossil fuel power station, and I will just jump here and we'll do a quick look to see what type it is. So it's a natural gas-fired power station. It's the second largest gas-fired power station in New South Wales, and is used during peak loads. So a lot of these gas turbines, they're essentially jet turbines. They're quite impressive. They're used during peak times to supplement the grid. So it shows you, that they're producing power, and they're probably taking away from the solar ones. So the FCAS costs, the frequency control ancillary services costs, are another one of those mysterious factors. None of these are mysterious. None of these are mysterious, guys. I mean, look at where the solar plant is. Okay? Look how far away it is from Sydney. Look how far away it is from Canberra. How much loss are you going to get? Guys, did you all do physics? Come on, that's not a surprise. The spot price discount. Well, they're competing with more efficient production. Guys, these modern jet turbine gas power generators are bloody impressive. They are bloody impressive. Network constraints, they should have been aware of that. All of this should have been understood in the project feasibility study when they did the initial design. Probably was, but everyone was just excited. They were excited. And government probably threw them land at them or money at them. So anyway, basically, they are cost recoverable from generators missing their forecast output, either pushing out too much or too little power and putting the system out of balance. Historically, FCAS costs amounted to just 1 or 2% of revenues being rebated back to the market operator. The GSD data shows that for many solar farms it is closer to 5 to 10%. So it is 7% at Colombley, which is a fairly heavy and ongoing erosion of margins. As Alan O'Neill points out, solar output is not as predictable as other generators due to things like clouds floating past, and therefore bear a disproportionate share of the FCAS costs. Why is it disproportionate if they are more unreliable? It seems. Anyway, I mean, guys, this shows, is it just me or do people not understand this technology? Have they not had a simple, try to charge something up on a solar panel, a cloud came over, it didn't work? What do people expect? This isn't the same as natural gas, as fossil fuels. This is once again submitting to nature. Same thing as wind farms, submitting to nature. Not controlling nature, guys. You can't control the weather. So I doubt that many, if any, of these headwinds were top of mind. Why the hell not? I doubt that many, if any, of these headwinds were top of mind for investors and off-takers in the rush to get solar projects up and running in the days of 3-digit spot prices from $80. LCGs, Mr. O'Neill said. Well, who cares then? Who cares? I do not feel sorry for this at all. This shows terrible risk assessment of the situation. You can't have good times all the time, guys. I just look at that. Look at that. Just think about that. What's the lifespan on these things? 25 years? Is it different for the commercial ones? So solar profits may not mean lower... solar profit pain may not mean lower power prices. And here's the problem, guys. All this infrastructure investment that is now producing at sometimes 30%, and they may even be making terrible money at that. It could have been the opportunity cost. How much cheaper would our power have been if you had have just built a couple of other, more efficient natural resource or fossil fuel plants. Power prices, we look here at the, business conditions and business confidence is not looking good from November. I thought I updated that. Nonetheless, it's going down, and at the very least in the November chart, power was a big issue. That was relative to business conditions. So green energy markets, Tristan Edis says the state of investment in solar in Queensland is a salient lesson. Basically, it has fallen off a cliff. Here we go. Queensland megawatt, large scale, 100 kilowatt renewable energy committed to construction by year. There you go. So we had a peak in 2017 and it shot right down. Well, just shows you guys, this is the market. This is the market responding. Queensland and South Australia have been at the forefront of depressed solar prices, but Mr. Edis argues New South Wales and Victoria are not far behind. Ultimately, they too will see depressed prices in the middle of the day. Victoria and South Australia will also see an increasingly significant wind generation price depression effect, he said. This is great news for electricity consumers. Unfortunately, though, it means New South Wales and Victoria will likely follow Queensland's footsteps of a renewable energy investment collapse in a year or so's time. One caveat is that maybe our governments will take their climate change commitment seriously, or another coal generator calls it quits. Why would that take it seriously here? I mean, I'm just going to bring up this quote to show to everyone, even if we replaced all of our, or stopped producing any CO2 in Australia, we would make no difference. No difference at all. All we would do is drive up the cost of living, guys, and people would feel good. Mr. O'Neill said the tumbling margins in large-scale solar will not necessarily show up as lower power bills for consumers anytime soon. But collectively, the impact of all these factors on a single project could account for a very significant share of someone's projected profit margin. Remembering that we don't know who bears the various risks and costs associated around under power purchase agreements and other contracts supporting the construction and generation and operation of these generators. In other words, if the solar plant's owner-operator has not managed to contract its output through PPAs, it will have to take the hit. But if it has PPAs in place, the buyer will be the one in pain paying for overpriced power. Oh, so there'll be a way where this solar investment is going to drive up power costs. But why is everyone telling me renewables cheaper? It's not necessarily life and death, but there are serious issues for future renewable energy farmers. It is about how costs and risks are shared, and that's the big dollar question, he said. I'm sure the next wave of solar farms will go in with their eyes open much wider. This seems to be reminiscent of all the wind farm crazes in the States they had in the 80s and 70s that were all left abandoned. That's my biggest scare, is the end. What happens to these things? I mean, look at that. That's huge. Huge amount of infrastructure. What else could that be producing out there? How many jobs does it actually create to maintain it? Anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. What do you think? Do you think will Australia ever start seeing investment in nuclear energy? It's very low CO2 emissions. We've got a lot of uranium here in Australia. The waste can be recycled in fourth generation plants, and stuff that isn't can be used as medicine. People are terrified of this stuff because they don't know about it. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and you want to help to support the channel grow, we have a Patreon where you can make a small monthly donation. We also have the ability for you to join the channel here on YouTube. You can also use our referral links at Independent Reserve, Amazon, and eBay for your crypto and consumer purchases. We sell pocket squares from the HeiseSays website. And finally, you can contribute through PayPal. Thank you to everyone who supports our channel. Take care, and I will talk to you all later. Bye for now.